So it was just a matter of going and doing it. And
Mm-hmm.
really, number one, I wanted to be able to say I passed on my first try. Welcome back, everyone. Craig and Leah here today. How are you today, Leah?
I'm well. You?
I'm great.
Why are you so great? I feel like you have something to say.
Yeah. So it's the day after. So I took my CDL test yesterday and I passed. Woohoo.
Woo!
So so I took my driving test yesterday. I knew I was prepared. I knew I should pass it, but sometimes when you're like, there's no reason I should fail, you're thinking of all the ways that you'll fail.
Yep.
And even my instructor said that sometimes the people you think should pass something, they brain fart, and those that you're like not sure about, they do it fine. So it was just a matter of going and doing it. And really, number one, I wanted to be able to say I passed on my first try.
Tell your son that?
Yeah,
rub it in his face?
Exactly. So I wanted to pass on the first time, and also with my trial coming up, I didn't want to have to like come back in 2 weeks and try to take the part of the test that I may have failed. So I studied hard for this thing. I was memorizing the pre-trip, all the different things you got to check, from headlights to horns to defrost to wipers to airlines to everything. So I was a little worried on the pre-trip test because I had it so memorized. I was afraid, like I didn't really have to think about it anymore, and I was like afraid I might miss something. So as I was going through, I started second guessing myself. I've got it right. I didn't miss anything on that, so that was good. I got a perfect score in the pre-trip, which is the first part where they go through and you check everything on your truck, or you explain to the judge that.
You call them judges?
No.
Waiter? What's that called?
I don't know what the name of it is.
Oh.
I think it's a proctor. We're going to say judge. Okay?
That's
the
what
testing
he's
judge,
with.
right? So the judge, so they go through your pre-trip, make sure that you can identify. Basically, you have to name and point to all the parts on the truck and trailer, and explain why you're testing it: tires, hoses, lines, brakes, all that kind of stuff. So got that done. That was the first one. And if I had failed any one of the three parts, I wouldn't have to take them all again. I just have to take the one that I failed. So I got that done. So that was good. Got perfect score on that. And then the second one, which is actually the one I was nervous about the most, was the backing maneuvers, only because we never actually practiced in the like the actual place where you take the test, which is on a kind of a big blacktop parking lot with cones. And what I've been told and was told is it will feel smaller on test day than you're used to because of the blacktop and there's more cones. The testing we had always done on a kind of a gravel parking lot around the shop, and most of the time I would hit it, and then sometimes I would just be completely off and I'd run a cone over, and that pretty much fails you. So
the cone could be a car, right?
Yeah, they don't like you hitting cones because apparently that's like hitting people. So they get really bent out of shape about that. So that was probably the one I was most nervous about. I was more nervous about that than the actual driving.
Yep.
But I passed that. I didn't get any points off, so that was good. So I aced that one. So I was like, okay, good. That was the one I was worried about. And I didn't want to have to come back and redo that one.
Yeah.
Really. But I also didn't want to come back and do the driving test because my whole goal in the driving test, so the driving test is about 15, 20 minutes, and you have to do a series of maneuvers, right? So you have to show that first of all, you know how to shift. So I did it on a manual transmission truck so that I don't have that restriction on my license. So if I was only ever going to drive an automatic and I did the testing on an automatic, I could drive any automatic truck. I wouldn't be able to drive a manual transmission truck. But I wanted to get that endorsement so that if I ever need to drive an automatic, I have that. That was what all my studying was on, and that's what the test was taken on that. So make sure you can shift. There's really two, as I understand it, three big things, big no-nos will absolutely fail you on the driving test: hitting a curve, stalling the truck, or like causing an accident, right? Those are, or like endangering, like you almost run over a pedestrian or something. Otherwise, you're getting points along the way, and you can have up to 30 points off. I think you start with, it's either 90 or 100, and you can have 30 demerit points, if you will. Things like going over the speed limit, not checking your mirrors enough.
Crossing lines at all?
Yeah, crossing over the fog line. I think that was one thing. I was trying to remember what. I did have one instance where I crossed over the fog line and he caught it. So you get like a point. Every time that happens, they give you a point.
The fog line is the one on the right?
Right,
the white one?
Yep, okay. Yep. The one that they get most people on is they'll just randomly ask you what what did that sign say that you just went past?
But that would get me.
I happened to get both of them. I was like, this is going to be where he's going to ask you the sign, and I was really trying to pay attention, and I got both of them. I was prepared to like not worry about those because it's just 2 points. Because that's probably the hardest thing about driving, especially as a new driver, is you're got to be watching your speed, so you can't speed at all, but you can't go less than 5 miles under the speed limit, right? You can't granny it. you gotta be in that sweet spot. So depending on where you're going, especially if the speed limit is 25, it can be really hard to stay between 20 and 25, especially if you're going down hills. You're trying to watch that, and a lot of times you just stop looking at the road signs. So that was something I really have been working on even in my car, is paying attention to the signs, and I would kind of like just say them under my breath as I went by. You have to like look both ways as you go through intersections. I think I got 1 point for one intersection. I didn't do enough of that. And then I got 1 point for grinding gears too much. I'm pretty good, but I'm not great. I got 3. I almost got a perfect score, so that was pretty happy about that. But yeah, so that went really well. Although, yeah, as we were coming back to everything was going, I could tell everything was going good. And probably the hardest thing about the driving test is approaching stoplights, because you have to slow down so that you can stop. But if it changes, you got to be ready to like accelerate. And so you're trying to line yourself up with the right gear.
Yep. And
So
it's
that
18 speed, right?
Yeah, and for those that have never driven an 18 speed, you basically have 4 speeds, and then you have a switch that goes up, and then you grab the next 4, and then you can split each one of them. Basically, effectively, you're driving what I would say is an 8 speed, 4 on the low end, 4 on the high end. And to go from the low end, you start over here, hit a switch up, and then you go all the way up. And then if you get into that, which is 5th gear basically, and then when you get into 5th gear, and that's usually the gear that you can operate in to make turns if you don't have to stop. But then if you have to stop, you got to get down onto the low side. And that is the hardest part. Switch it down and go all the way back over to 4th. And that was my biggest concern. And that's where people have failed, is you get caught in that in between. And if you stall the truck, it's an automatic fail, which I get it. But that was my biggest fear, is getting caught. I lucked out. I had all the stoplights worked for me.
Good.
It's much easier to come up to a stop sign, because then you got to stop. Just got to stop, start over. You just got to remember to drop your switch down. That's the thing. If you leave it on the high side, and then you try to go, you will stall the truck. So that was my thing. Don't stall the truck. Don't stall the truck, and don't hit a curb. Those are the 2 things I kept telling myself.
And grinding the gears is not stalling, so you did a good job.
No, I'm, like I said, I'm good, but not great on the I know it's not shifting quite fast enough. And you have to double clutch.
Yeah. Did you want to talk about that a little, or a different video?
No, I'll talk about it a little bit, because hopefully I'll never have to do it again. Double clutching is one of those things they require you to do for the exam that literally you'll never do again. I mean, unless you drive a really old truck. Most drivers, especially experienced drivers, you only use the clutch to get started. So when you come to a stop, you'll need to use the clutch to get into like the first gear you're going to pull away from. And after that, they do what's called floating gears. So you just let off the gas, pull the shifter, and then put it in. And all you're really controlling is the accelerator to get it up to the right RPMs. Otherwise, you're really not clutching anymore.
Different from a vehicle, then.
Yes. Yeah. So the test is closer to driving a car, I would say, than driving an actual truck after you got your license, because of the double clutching. But I got pretty good at it, but I'll probably never have to do it again. So it's one of those weird things where like they make you do it for an exam. And this is where, like, if let's say you are an experienced truck driver, and let's say you had your Class B, which allows you to drive a straight truck, not a truck and trailer. Those guys tend to struggle if they go to take their Class A license, because they've gotten so used to floating gears. It's harder for them to learn the double clutch than someone like me that's never driven truck before. But got through that fine. Probably the wildest moment, we had police cars pull out. Just in front of me as I was coming down a hill, getting ready to shift down. A cop car pulled out with its lights on, and I had to get over quickly. So I'm watching the cop trying to get over, and I couldn't get into gear. So I just left in neutral and pulled over, and I didn't get it dinged for that, but I was like, man,
that was close.
Yeah. And I told the judge, I said, you planned that, didn't you? He's like, nope, that was completely random. So that was like the most eventful thing. Yeah, I lucked out, and I lucked out on the stoplights, and I lucked out on, like I said, my tendency was to try to stay like more than 5 under the speed limit, so I didn't accidentally roll over and automatically get a ticket for speeding. But it's hard, like I said, to just stay within that 5 miles. But I had a couple of slow cars ahead of me that I had to stay behind.
Yeah.
So it worked out good. Everything lined up for me, other than the police car with its lights on. Everything lined up for me, and I got in.
Who did you bribe to get all the stoplights and all the slow cars and all that?
I was saying a few prayers before and during the test, so I don't know. You be the judge. So I got that done, and I was very happy. I mean, I could tell I was doing well. I had gotten through. You have to go through so many intersections. You have to make so many turns. You have to pull out onto kind of a busy road, and a couple of the other things you have to do is you have to show that you can pull off to the side of the road and keep your truck parallel with the curb and also close but not hitting it. So that's one maneuver, and then you have to do a couple lane change maneuvers, and then you have to simulate what you would do crossing railroad tracks.
I was gonna ask about railroad tracks. I've seen buses do different things or open the door, but I didn't know how truck would be.
So that's a little different rule. So like school buses, I think, are mandatory to stop at all train tracks, even if the arms aren't down. Right. In the school bus, I may actually get my school bus endorsement at some time just to have that. It's a little different level of training. And of course, there's testing that you have to do on how to like safely get kids on and off the bus that I didn't have to go through. But you have to have the commercial license to start with. Which
is what you have now.
Which I have now. Woo. Class A, no restrictions other than my glasses. I can't see anything. But yeah, so for railroad tracks, obviously if the bars come down, you got to stop for it. But if not, basically the rules are you got to be in the right lane, and you have to be listening and looking for trains as you approach, and then as you are crossing the tracks. And probably the biggest thing is you just don't shift. You're not allowed to shift while on the tracks, just in case you lose a gear and stall. No one just stalling on the tracks. You don't shift until you're completely clear of the railroad tracks. We did a simulated one of that with a mailbox as a reference point.
So you'd be cruising through that railroad crossing in neutral?
No.
Oh.
No. You stay. You come up in a gear. You're in gear, and then you stay in that gear. You don't shift gears until you're completely free of it.
Okay.
So and the other thing that I had a habit of doing before I got trained, and this is. If you're driving a car and you're used to driving stick shift, as you come up to it, a lot of times you'll just put it in neutral. That's a no-no with semis. So when you come up, you're allowed to put the clutch in and coast up to the length of the truck and trailer before a stop sign, which is kind of nice, which is sort of like riding the clutch.
I see. Yep.
But you're supposed to keep it in gear until you come to a complete stop. I had a habit starting out. I'd almost come to a stop, and then I'd start, I'd take it out of gear. Unfortunately, I didn't do that during the test. I did it all right.
Yeah, good. Did you want to shout out your instructor, your school, your training again? We did it before, but he's successful, so we got to mention it again today.
Yep. So if you're in the La Crosse area, it's called Ready to Run Trucking. They're based out of Viroqua. Highly recommend them. I had a great experience there. And so we'll put another link in the description. Ready to Run Trucking. I did ask him if he'd come on the podcast, and I think he's going to. Woo-hoo! So we'll be doing an episode with him in the near future. But they're out of Viroqua, and not all truck driving schools are the same. Like there aren't requirements on what has to be done, other than you have to do it. And probably the biggest difference between schools is how much actual driving you get to do. He said there's some schools that will be cheaper, but you might drive for 3 days, and then they have you do your test. So I got 30 hours, and I used all 30 hours. Now, you're not behind the wheel the entire time. Some of it you're doing, trips, looking over the truck. Some of it is like backing practice and stuff like that. But I got a lot of driving, a lot of miles, and that made a huge, huge difference. So that's, I would say, the biggest thing if you're looking for a trucking school, a truck driving school, find out how many hours and miles you actually get behind the wheel, because that really is the difference maker, especially on the actual driving test, because that's something when you first start out. I mean, fortunately, I'd driven a stick shift before, so I can do that, but I was terrible at it. And trying to slow down and downshift was really hard for me. And it took a number of trips before I got the hang of it. I wouldn't say I'm perfect at it, but it took a while to get comfortable with that, where I was confident in myself. If I needed to slow down, I could downshift correctly. And that's something you would need a number of hours behind the wheel in order to get competent at that. So, yeah, find a truck driving school that will give you enough hours. You kind of get what you pay for, but yeah, I can't recommend them enough. So, yeah, shout out to Ready to Run Trucking. They're great guys, and yeah,
we'll see them on the pod eventually.
Yep. Looking forward to that.
Yeah. So we've gotten some comments on some videos, clips, TikToks. Craig, can you tell us like which exact video or what exactly you wanted to shout out and answer?
Yeah, so we've been, for whatever reason, people like TikTok, and I like TikTok. Truckers and farmers love TikTok, and that's my target audience, if you will. So we've been posting a lot of videos. We had a couple that kind of went viral for our standards.
Yeah.
Shout out to Leah. Ooh. Yeah, it was all Leah.
Yeah. The title.
That's right. Yeah.
Right here.
But it was, and I had one go viral on the other channel. So basically, you have the lacrosse lawyer channel and the trucking lawyer channel. They're both me. This same kind of content, little different audience, but both kind of went wild for the same reason, and it had to do with the topic of the fact that in most states, such as Wisconsin, I'm just talking about Wisconsin for now, you don't have to have a CDL for certain situations like firefighters, maybe not firefighters, but like first responders. But one of the biggest exemptions is agriculture, farmers being able to drive trucks and their employees being able to drive trucks, including semis, hauling grain, hauling corn, silage, hauling manure. Depending on the state and the rules, you can do that without having a commercial driver's license. The question was whether that's a good idea, because in one of our last episodes, we had talked about a pretty bad crash that happened involving a farm truck, a 17-year-old that couldn't have had a CDL because you're not eligible until you're 18. And there was a lot of comments on both sides of the aisle. Some people were saying, farmers that are better drivers than those that have been, have a commercial driver's license, and kids have been driving their trucks out in the fields for whatever. And there's some merit to that. I'm not saying there's not, but there was also a lot of people, including farmers, said, I would not put someone in a truck if they didn't have a CDL, even if I'm not required to. And then kind of everything in between. And one of the persons I was commenting with who said, I know lots of a lot of farmers that are better drivers than CDL drivers. Well, let's talk about a brand new driver. We agree that someone that's never driven truck before and you put them behind a wheel, if they have a CDL, is going to be a little better driver, a little safer driver than someone that didn't have any of that. Once you've got experience, that's a different thing. And we're really just talking about like new drivers, right? And depending on the school you go through, like I said earlier, not every school is the same. But if you go to a good school like I did, you're going to be like a really good driver, a really safe, comfortable driver after you get done. Could I have driven a truck without a license? Yeah, I could have figured it out. I've driven farm trucks in the past, but a lot of the stuff I would have not been good at, right? And so that was kind of the big point. But one of the things I was thinking about is, and this is something we'll cover in more detail in another episode, but I want to kind of just kind of touch on it right now, is, yes, so as a farmer, depending on the rules, you may not be required to have a CDL license to drive your own semi, hauling corn to the elevator, for example. You may not be required to, and you may be able to employ your kids, whatever. As long as they got they're 16 and they have a driver's license, they may be able to legally drive your truck and trailer. Now, that does not change the fact that if they get into a crash, you can be liable. And I would say there's a decent argument to be made that you have more liability as a farmer if you employ someone that doesn't have CDL training than someone that does.
And you want to expand on that?
Yeah, you could be setting yourself up for a claim of negligent entrustment. You're putting someone on the road that, let's say, is inexperienced or unqualified, not in the technical legal sense, but in the practical sense. If they don't have any actual experience or training on how to drive, you could personally be responsible for them, right? And so that I think and there's kind of two layers there, because generally speaking, you are much more likely to be legally responsible for your employees driving, whether they have a CDL or not, than a contractor, right? An independent contractor. Let's say you hire a company that does your hauling for you, which is very common, right? That is more expensive, let's say, than maybe having your own employees. But if you hire a company and they have training systems, they hire CDL drivers. That may protect you if one of those drivers gets into a crash. Your auto insurance, your commercial insurance may cover them, but your own personal liability may be safer if you hire a contractor, or if you're going to have your own employees. If you hire someone with a CDL license, I think you have a greater protection from personal liability for your employees if they get into a crash, if they have a CDL and or training, as opposed to a young person that doesn't have a CDL or any driving experience. That's something I want to like emphasize, is just because you legally may not be required to have a CDL, or your employees not required to have a CDL, if they get into a crash, that may make a huge difference on whether you and your farm and your family um, have legal exposure for them above and beyond whatever. Hopefully, you have insurance on your trucks. It could also have implications for your insurance. You need to make sure that your insurance company is going to cover your drivers, your employees. Maybe they have something and they're requiring them to have a CDL, right? So those are things I really wanted to emphasize, is just because you maybe legally can go without a CDL or have employees without a CDL, realize that it may not be a good idea in the long run if they get into a crash, as compared to either only hiring people with a CDL or hiring another company that hires CDL drivers. So something to keep in mind.
Yeah. And from the comments too, it seemed like the requirement or lack thereof for CDL for farm kind of widespread. Some other states participate in that as well. So it's not just our Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin area. It's beyond that too.
Yeah. There's going to be some differences in the states. Now, some of it may be limited. There may be federal components as well. And typically, like in Wisconsin, and now you check with the DMV, but the general rule in Wisconsin is that you can be exempt from the CDL requirement if you drive your own truck, or you're employed by a farmer. You're hauling the farmer's stuff, so you're not hiring someone else's stuff. You're not doing it for hire. And then you stay within 150 miles of the farm, and you can't cross state lines, right? So if you farm on the border and you have fields across the border, let's say not here along the river, but let's say like between Wisconsin and Illinois, you cannot drive interstate. Probably not. Maybe there's some special rule between them, but generally speaking, you'd have to stay in the state within 150 miles and only be hauling that farmer's produce and goods and equipment, stuff like that.
Good to know. Maybe future episode content.
Yeah, I think I will do a future episode on that. Might be something good to cover with Paul, my driving instructor, because he really understands the rules in terms of who's required to have a CDL. There's a lot of people out there that are driving without a CDL that probably should have one. Maybe you've got a decent sized pickup truck and a flatbed trailer, or you're hauling cattle and stuff like that. You may be of a size, just basically based on weight. If you're over a certain weight and you're doing it for hire, there's a good chance you have to have a CDL, and it's especially true, I think, if you cross state lines. So something to keep in mind. We'll do a deep dive there, because I think it's an interesting thing. And like I said, it has both let's say, ramifications for the state in terms of whether you can get a ticket or even be criminally charged if you're driving without a license, but also then has liability implications, so that if you or someone that's driving for you gets into a crash, you want to make sure that you're, number one, adequately insured for that, and that you and your assets, whether you have an LLC, a lot of farmers own the farm in their own name. You want to make sure you're not losing the farm to save a few dollars by hiring someone without a CDL, for example. Those are some really, really important things that once a crash happens, there's nothing you can do about it, right? So we want to make sure people understand that beforehand, so that they can reduce as much as possible exposure for those kinds.
Well, congratulations again, Craig.
Yeah,
CDL champ.
Yeah, I decided to go to the DMV today and get it done, because I was like, oh, maybe I'll wait till after my trial. But I'm like, nope, we're just gonna go in there. If the line is long, I'll grab the paperwork and come back. Got in, my results were uploaded, so I don't have the card yet. That will come in the mail, but I do have a legal certificate, so I can drive. I can drive a semi if I want to. So not sure I'm going to. I would be interested in. I would actually enjoy maybe doing some seasonal driving for farmers, hauling grain, hauling silage, hauling manure, because I like the trucking and the farming together. Yeah. So we'll see. Maybe some opportunities. I can do a little even a little volunteering, because I think that'd be fun. We'll make some videos.
Yeah,
that was the only condition.
Yes.
I get to bring my GoPro along and take some video while I'm doing it. So
absolutely. So what can viewers expect in the next couple weeks? You got your medical malpractice trial.
Yep. So if video's down, content's down for a week or two, that's why. But after that, we'll be up and at 'em. You and I will be recording every week, and I'll be doing stuff on both the trucking and farming side of things. And like I said, going to bring in Paul, and I got some other guests, maybe some insurance agents I'd like to get in and talk about insurance coverage issues. So that'll be coming out. So if there's if there's questions that people have and they want us to cover it, leave us a comment. Whatever, get a hold of us. You can go to my website, farmandtruckinjury.com. I have information on that, and there's ways you can contact us there. And if you have a legal case, like if someone was involved in an accident, don't talk about that in the comments. Don't even DM us on the platforms. Just send us an email or go to the contact page on the website. We'll put that information in the description below. That way it's confidential.
Absolutely. Okay? Thanks.
All right.
For listening, everybody.
Thank you, Leah. Till next time, everyone.
Craig.
All right. Very good.